members of parliament or as members of the legislature, nobody in charge, something that we no longer have any control over.
We all know that public service is critical for our country. The question is Canada's public service, that is elected and non-elected, is it broken? Well, that's the question we're going to talk about today with our next guest. So with me here today to talk about this question, is public service broken in this country, is the Honourable Dorothy Dobbie. Dorothy is a former MP with the riding of Winnipeg South. She's a business person. She's also an author, and she just completed a report with the Frontier Centre on this very topic. So a warm welcome to you, Dorothy.
Well, thank you very much. I have to tell you, though, I'm not honourable.
Okay.
I did never earn that title. I was a parliamentary secretary.
All right. Okay. Well, then we stand corrected. So with me here today is Dorothy Dobbie, a former MP for Winnipeg South and business person and author. And she's also the author of a report that was done with Frontier entitled Restoring Accountability, Fixing Canada's Public Administration. And I wanted to congratulate you on the report, your analysis, Dorothy. I thought it was very thoughtful and insightful about a topic that we typically don't talk about. And so my first question to you would be, why did you think it was timely to talk about public service in our country?
Why was it timely? Well, there's so much going on. There's so much confusion. There seems to be a lack of accountability. I feel that some of the ministers and at every level of government, those who are responsible, are powerless. They don't seem to have the sense of responsibility. In fact, it's very interesting because I heard from a former minister from Manitoba the other day on another piece I wrote, and he said, and was a former NDP minister, and he said, I'm very glad to see the story you wrote about small c conservatism. He said, in my own party, I wonder whatever happened to the word responsible in the NDP. And that doesn't just extend to the NDP. I think there's a lot of that feeling that there's nobody in charge, and that the sense of responsibility that was given to us as members of parliament or as members of the legislature is something that we no longer have any control over. And that is affecting everything we do, and it's affecting how we are governed.
Okay, so a key theme is accountability. I think as members of the public, we assume that when we vote for our elected representatives, that they're in fact in charge. And I thought it was interesting that from the report that you said, basically the system, you state that Canada's public service, once a global model of professionalism, has been hijacked by political operatives and rigid union rules that prioritize power over public service. Career bureaucrats have been replaced by political insiders and unqualified appointees, while layers of inefficient management, slow decision-making drive up costs. So, it's a pretty hard-hitting kind of report and insight. And you actually say this is kind of a threat to good governance in Canada. So what do you mean by that?
I mean, it's a threat to democracy. I mean, we are based on our system is responsible government. That's why I use that word, which means that the minister or the member of parliament or whoever it is responsible for the decisions that are taken and the actions that are taken. And when we abrogate the responsibility, the accountability for that, we have no democracy, because you have to be. The accountability is, if you don't do your job, if things don't go right, you lose your job, you lose the election, somebody else comes in. And when you have no real power over how those decisions are made, that there's lip service paid to the minister or perhaps the legislator, it means that they don't really know what's going on. They're just following the dictates of people in the back room who are not elected, who have their own biases and their own views, and who deliver the information to the person who is accountable as if it was the gospel, as if that was the only answer. And we have all these rules that say you can't lobby, as if lobbying is a bad thing. I mean, that's what we do as citizens. If we see an elected representative, the first thing we do is we want to tell them what we think. And that's a good thing. But that minister or that citizen or that representative needs to be able to speak to everybody, hear what everybody says, listen to it carefully. You've got the time to do this job because that's what you're elected to do. You don't have anything else to worry about, and make decisions that are based on a lot of information, not just one pipeline.
Okay, so help us understand then the basics around this situation then, because you say that well, for instance, political staff interfere with that kind of direct dynamic between elected officials and how things get done. So, what do you mean by political staff?
Well, at one time, each minister, each member of parliament hired their own member, their own staff member, their own chief of staff, their own, supporters, and they still do in constituencies. But in the federal parties and in the provincial party where I come from, it is no longer the job of the minister to hire his own staff member. The PMO in Ottawa or the premier's office in one of the provinces does the hiring. It's like a little hiring agency. And in Manitoba, then I not only do the hiring, but they also in the past government switched if somebody changed the portfolio, they didn't leave your chief of staff with you. They kept him there because he's the guy that knows everything, and moved you to another portfolio where you're supposed to be getting information from another chief of staff. How does that help you? You have to be able to relate to the department. You have to be able to relate directly to the deputy minister. If you think about some of the things that have happened in the past year or so, where ministers at the federal level have said, we didn't know. Well, I didn't know. I believe him. I believe him absolutely. And I think when we hear from Robert, we'll hear why. Because they weren't told. There was information that was available for the minister, and it wasn't passed on because this unelected person is saying, we don't do that.
Hold this for a sec here. So you're saying that if there's an elected official, let's take this as an example, say the Minister of Natural Resources, the public would assume that the political staff around his office are people that he or she may relate to and he knows well and works well, when in fact, that's all been flipped on its head where the premier's office or the prime minister's office, the PMO, as you said, parachute all those people in and they report back to that central office. So that office is you're saying, is basically undermines any of that kind of autonomy or power of the minister. It's all centralized. Is that what you're saying?
It centralizes power in the office of the premier, the prime minister, the mayor in some cases. And it means that the individual who has been charged with the responsibility, and it's kind of interesting because this morning we're hearing the swearing in of new ministers, they don't really have any power. And in fact, I can give you a direct quote from a former minister in this particular government who once heard her chief of staff being approached by a new person in the office saying, I have some information for the minister. I need to take it to her right away. And the answer was, give it to me, from the chief of staff. We only tell her what she needs to know. She overheard this. I said, why didn't you fire them? She said, I can't. They were hired by the prime minister's office. She had no power. So she said when she was there, she built her own little place and then did her own little thing because she really didn't know what was going on in the global picture.